Hello all and welcome back to the GRETA-THON on Coffee Nick's Movie Picks, a limited film review series celebrating and honoring the portfolio of Greta Gerwig over a lovely cup of coffee. My name is Nick Delaney and I'm your show host, coffee reviewer, Gerwig film researcher, and the guy who played Mr. Lawrence in his high school's production of Little Women, the musical. We're going off to Massachusetts. If you know, you know. In our sixth part of the GRETA-THON series, we'll be discussing the 2019 film adaptation of Little Women, directed and written for the screen by Greta Gerwig and starring Saoirse Ronan. This episode's film review will be paired with the delicious Habibi Latte from Detour Coffee Co in Arlington, Virginia. Please take a seat, stay a while, and let's talk, I think the poets might disagree, over some coffee. But first, please be sure to follow at Coffee Nick's Movie Picks on Instagram and TikTok. There you can stay up to date on new releases, see coffee pictures that go along with each and every episode, get some quick movie thoughts from yours truly, and submit Dear Coffee Nick letters. Again, that's at Coffee Nick's Movie Picks on Instagram and TikTok. For those of you who are just joining us, we are kind of in the middle of something here. Yeah. We are currently in the sixth episode of the GRETA-THON series. So, if you would like to know more about what that means, please find the introduction episode on the podcast profile and then come back to this episode. In addition, parts 1 through 5 of the GRETA-THON, which include reviews on Frances Ha and Lady Bird, are out now for your listening pleasure. I cannot believe we are already on part 6. We only have one more, after this episode, we only have one more full-length review in the GRETA-THON, and we also only have one more shorter-length review after this. So, I don't know, it went by so fast, didn't it? But I would like to say thank you all for your patience with the GRETA-THON. If you were following the schedule at all, you would know that I had to push back the dates a little bit, and then I had to push them back again. Life has been a lot. I've been adjusting to moving to a new place. I have been seeing the sights. I've been living life. I've just been taking time to relax and to reflect a lot about this series. I think I needed time to think about how I'm enjoying this GRETA-THON series. I think I've learned a lot from it. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit in my finale episode that's coming out at the very end of the GRETA-THON. But also, I had to delay this episode a second time, and the next episode has to be delayed as well. I recorded this episode already. I was recording this episode, and it was so good. It was probably my best episode, my best review that I've done. I was so proud of it. I even said at the end of the episode, I was like, this is my best review ever. I love it. So I finish up the episode, I close the window, and I go over to my recording software. I didn't record half the episode. It stopped recording. So I took off my headphones halfway through the episode because I was getting so into it and I didn't want my big clunky headphones on. And when you do that, I use GarageBand. GarageBand freaks out and it's like, hey, what happened? Because you lost your, You lost your output. So it freaks out. And I don't know why. That is not reason enough to stop the presses, alert the president and everything. It should be able to just continue after that. But it did not. So I lost half the episode. And of course, I felt like I did such a good job. So I was really discouraged after that. And I was like, okay, I'm not doing it tonight. I just cannot. So I just gave myself the evening and the day to come back to this episode because I was a little discouraged. I hope that this episode will be as good as the original one, but we'll see. I think it's just one of those things. It'll be hard to replicate, but this episode will just be its own thing. It'll be even better in its own way. But yeah, I've taken some time to live life a little bit. Moving was absolutely exhausting, but I took time to get to know the area. I've been hanging out with a lot of friends, trying to make new friends and everything since I'm in a new city. And I've been able to watch a lot of movies, of course, which has been very nice. One of those movies being Alien Romulus, which a lot of you may know that has been one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I will probably be doing a review for that sometime. after the GRETA-THON is over, which you can expect our regularly scheduled programming to resume in early to mid-September. I do want to take like a little short hiatus in between there somewhere, so we'll see, but it will be short because I'm excited to get back to other movies. Yes. But yeah, much needed time away. Moving has been a lot, but I've been having a great time up here in DC. I've been checking out local coffee places that I am very excited to review. I've been seeing the sights, meeting the people, eating the food, etc., etc. Just all around been having a good time. So yeah, thumbs up. Nick pick. Yeah. Also, side note, for those of you that listen to the Ladybird episode, just ignore that. Just ignore that. That episode was a lot. You know, I was expecting to get emotional in that episode, of course, but I wasn't expecting it to happen so soon. For those of you that listened to it, or didn't listen to it, it was during the coffee thought. But I don't regret it. I wouldn't have published it if I didn't want that to go out. I was very happy with it. But I really think like my review of Lady Bird in that episode was just nonsense and a little incoherent. And I was expecting that a little bit. I did say at the beginning, like this might be one of just my craziest reviews, just talking absolutely nonsense for an hour. And it was. I think it was. I really hope that all of you were able to get something out of it and to make sense of what I was saying. But it is hard to talk about your favorite movie. And I don't know if I'll be doing that again on this show. My movies, they are my favorite because they mean so much to me. And oftentimes they are my favorite because I can't quite put into words what they mean to me. So to be forced to put into words like how that movie makes me feel and everything, I think it very much flustered me. So yeah, that episode was a little wild. Maybe I'll return to Lady Bird in the future and give it another go. But I mentioned in that episode that every time I watch that movie, it means something different to me. And I take something new away from it. And I've seen it like, I don't know, easily over 20 times. So to like touch on everything that it means to me and has ever meant to me, that's a lot of pressure. So yeah, I don't want to do that again. It was a lot. I love that movie. I mean, obviously, that's why I'm saying all this. But I think I'm learning. This is one area where I'm learning from the GRETA-THON. Sometimes it's not always the best choice to review your favorite movies. Sometimes those movies should just stay far away from your podcast or whatever your reviewing platform is. But yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the finale episode. I have a lot to say in that finale episode. I don't know if I said it yet, but I also have some exciting news to share. So there's that. And I also got that exciting news at the same time that I was recording the Lady Bird episode, which was very poetic, and you'll find out why. But yeah, I think we should get into the Now Brewing. Let's do that. Now Brewing is a luxury coffee discussion and review segment. Now Brewing for this episode is an iced Habibi Latte from Detour Coffee Co in Arlington, Virginia. What is that? Huh? Okay, so Habibi, that is an Arabic word meaning my love. Aww. Aww. Anyways, the Habibi Latte is made with oat milk, dates, walnuts, cardamom, and cinnamon. And I think this is something that just Detour Coffee Company does. I was trying to figure out if other coffee companies or like coffee houses have a Habibi Latte, but I think this is just them. I might be wrong though. So yes, oat milk, dates, walnuts, cardamom, and cinnamon. First of all, some of those flavors are things that I never would have imagined having in coffee before. And I haven't had in coffee before. So this drink was very much like an adventure drink for me. It was outside my comfort zone. I think I was just going to get like a cold brew or something. But I didn't. The barista recommended this and I was a little like, oh, but do I really want that one? But I was like, I should try it. If it's their specialty, it is special. So I should try it. And I did. And it was delicious. It was so good. All of these flavors here come together beautifully, which is so cool because these are such unique flavors. I rarely even have walnuts, dates, and cardamom, let alone have them all together in a coffee. And when I was drinking this, it actually looks like they grind these things themselves in-house, because it looked like there were bits and pieces of these ingredients at the bottom of the cup, which is a good thing. These are natural flavors. This is not just like a pump of syrup they're getting shipped in from who knows where. Like, I don't know for sure, but it looked like they are making these flavors from scratch, and that's probably why it tastes so good. And the other thing about this drink is that it sets you perfectly in the fall mood. These really aren't like fall flavors, but I don't know. It just put me there. It kind of has like that autumn spice flavor. It's not pumpkin spice. It doesn't remind me of pumpkin pie or anything. It's just there are different spices happening here. It's very warm, even though I got it iced. Warm meaning it made my heart warm, but not in like a heart disease way. It just made me feel good, okay? It made me feel good. It's very warm, comforting. It was nice. It was very lovely. I enjoyed this drink. And I also paired this drink with a food item that I want to talk about. I got their chai bread, which I don't know if I've had chai bread before. I love chai, but the chai bread was just outstanding. It was so good. The serving was very generous. It was like a thick loaf that they gave you, or not loaf, but a thick slice that they gave you. And the bread was nice and moist, and it had this thin layer of icing on top. And it was that type of icing that's like very crispy and flaky. It was just divine. It was so good. And of course, the spiciness of the chai paired wonderfully with the flavors of this Habibi Latte. And they had so many other really delicious sounding drinks. So I definitely have to go back to try these. They had a s'mores-inspired campfire latte. They had a Habibi chai, a coconut cold brew, and an Aerocano. The Aerocano they describe as an Americano version of a nitro. And that just sounds right up my alley. I have to try that sometime. An important thing to note is that all of Detour Coffee Company's bakery items are made at the store, so they are always fresh, which is, if you're going to do it, that is really like the only way to do it. I really can't stand coffee houses that give you like stale pastries or, the pastries were very obviously just frozen and then thawed and then handed to you. These are made in-house. They are made fresh, which is just lovely. They also have a ton of other food options. They have breakfast items, sandwiches, salads, hot and cold mezza, brunch, and even cocktails if you feel like getting a little crazy, feel like getting a little fun in there. I would really highly recommend trying Detour Coffee Company. I think there's a few locations around Northern Virginia. Definitely check. But if not, there's one in Arlington, and it's located right in the middle of all the action, so you can't miss it. The atmosphere in the cafe is also really great. It's decorated beautifully, and it's just so cozy. When I went here, I met a friend that I hadn't seen in a while, and we just had such a great time catching up and spilling the tea and everything. It was a great atmosphere for catching up with loved ones. So yeah, definitely rendezvous at Detour Coffee Company. With all of that being said, I give the Habibi Latte from Detour the Nick pick. The Habibi Latte is outright delicious and delivers a melody of unique flavors that you don't often find in coffee. I highly recommend pairing this latte with their chai bread to be transported to an autumnal landscape where leaves are falling from the sky and onto a dampened roadway, where mushrooms are growing in a darkened forest. You're meeting your friends for a little Halloween movie party, maybe watching Over the Garden Wall. There's pumpkin pie, apple pie, sweet potato pie. The holidays are looming on the horizon. Leaves crunch beneath your step, and the damp scent of fall is permeating the air. You feel rejuvenated, you feel alive, you feel ready to take on what the seasons ahead have in store for you. So eat your heart out, pumpkin spice. This is my personal fall flavor. I'm having a Habibi fall. Yeah, forget pumpkin spice, but actually don't. It's a classic. My last note about Detour Coffee Company. When you visit, you are not only sure to have an amazing food and coffee experience, but you will also be supporting a lovely and local Palestinian-owned business. With that being said, I highly recommend going here and supporting them. Okay, onwards. Our next segment is the Coffee Thought, which is an outlet dedicated to voice my many and coherent thoughts over a lovely cup of coffee. And as always, I don't have coffee with me. I have a Pamplemousse LaCroix, if that's how you say it. How do you say Pamplemousse? Let's see.
Pamplemousse.
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 Pamplemousse. Pamplemousse. How do they say grapefruit? I know how to say grapefruit. I just want to hear how they say it.
Grapefruit.
Grapefruit. Grapefruit.
Grapefruit.
Grapefruit. Grapefruit.
Pamplemousse.
Pamplemousse. Pamplemousse. Anyways, I'm sipping on a little Pamplemousse LaCroix, otherwise known as grapefruit. What am I saying? What am I doing? Okay. Focus. We have a coffee thought. We have a coffee thought happening right now. Okay. If you have listened to this show before, if you are a loyal listener, perhaps, you know that another function of this show, it's not just coffee and movie reviews. I am also an expert reporter on any news regarding the scrapped Batgirl film. So for those of you that do not know, there was a Batgirl, live action Batgirl movie that had already been made. It was made and it was scrapped after the fact and has never seen the light of day. No one knows, anything about it. No one's seen it. I think maybe they have a hard drive that they snuck out. I think someone mentioned like the directors. But this movie was pretty much finished and Warner Brothers Discovery just scrapped it. And I've been upset about it ever since. It's been like 2 or 3 years that this has happened. So I've had beef with Warner Brothers Discovery since this happened. And another function of this podcast is that when there is new news, when there's headlines or something new about the Batgirl movie, I report on it. And so I have something to share today about the Batgirl movie. So Michael Keaton, who originally played Batman, he played Batman in the 80s with the Jack Nicholson Joker and then in Batman Returns. He was like one of the first people to really, really bring Batman to the silver screen. I know there were Batman actors before that, of course, iconic ones too. But I feel like Michael Keaton, if we're talking about like, modern Batman movies as we know it, he was the first Batman. So Michael Keaton was set to to appear in the Batgirl movie, much like he appeared in the Flash movie. He was a major character in Flash as his version of Batman. So he was set to appear in Batgirl, and recently he was asked what his thoughts were about the film being just scrapped altogether. Michael Keaton said, "No, I didn't care one way or another. Big, fun, nice check." You're kidding. Like, you have got to be joking. I was starting to really respect Michael Keaton. I recently watched Beetlejuice. Before this news came out, I watched Beetlejuice. And I was like, wow, Michael Keaton, he's a really great guy, I think. And he's such a versatile actor. And he does so much, and I don't think he gets enough credit. I take that back. Michael Keaton, we know that you don't care one way or another. You were in Morbius. We know that you don't care. We know that you don't give a fuck about your career anymore. We know you're just in it for the money because you were the only MCU actor that Sony could scrounge up to be in Morbius. You were in fucking Morbius opposite Jared Leto. I know it was only for a few moments, but yeah, we know you don't give a fuck. Yeah, we know. You were in the Flash movie. I mean, we know. We know. You don't have to say it. We know. We know you're just in it for the money. We know you don't care. And honestly, it's a shame because you could be doing so much better and you could care and really be in great movies. And you could be advocating for movies like this to get released and to not be mistreated by studio executives, but you're not. You're not. And, you know, it's really a shame. I'm a Batman fan. I think that's pretty clear. I'm a Batman fan. A lot of people are very attached to Michael Keaton's Batman. And although the Flash movie wasn't that good, a lot of people were very just happy to see Michael Keaton's Batman in that movie and to reprise his role. The movie wasn't great. And it was, you know, bad writing and everything, sure. But it means a lot to people to see, like, you know, a character that means so much to them come back. So for Michael Keaton to be like, oh, I didn't care one way or another, big, fun, fat check, that is disrespectful to his fans. That is disrespectful to his fans. If he cared, he would be advocating for this film to be released. But he clearly does not. A lot of people care about this character and they care about him playing this character. You know, they don't want to just see like any old Batman show up. They want to see Michael Keaton's Batman. So I think that this is a slap in the face to the fans. Brendan Fraser was supposed to be in the Batgirl movie. He was playing Firefly, which is a Batman villain, if you are not aware. And but he's never been in a Batman movie. This would have been his first role. But even when this movie was scrapped, even he was advocating for it. He was even saying, like, you know, so much work went into this. It's really such a shame. You know, he at least paid some respects to this movie. But Michael Keaton, the Batman legacy actor, could not even be bothered. I have lost so much respect for him. And now I'll be going to see the Beetlejuice sequel for Winona Ryder and Catherine O'Hara and Jenna Ortega, and not for Michael Keaton. So, Michael Keaton, I hope you can sleep at night knowing that fact. It's such a shame. It's such a shame. And I, you know, for as long as I live or until this movie gets released, I will not be over this and I will not stop talking about it. I will be the thorn in the side of Warner Brothers Discovery. It's true. It's true. They're trying to distract us with this Dune content. And for a little while it worked, but the distraction is over now. And I'm back on my bullshit. Yeah. I think I need to talk about the movie. I think I need to move along. But also I'll do what I want. I will do what I want. I'm still so sad that the original episode was deleted. That is really a shame. I was having such a good time with it. I am now, too. But it feels like I'm, you know, it's hard to like talk about the same stuff I did last time. I feel like I'm just not as excited talking about it the second time. And there's nothing I can do about that, really. So it's a shame. But I will know for next time not to take my headphones off. Okay, moving on. This next segment is now showing the GRETA-THON, our feature ideological analysis and critical film review segment honoring and celebrating the portfolio of Greta Gerwig, hosted by yours truly. Now showing for part 6 of the GRETA-THON series, Little Women. Little Women is the 2019 adaptation of Louisa May Alcott's classic and groundbreaking novel, which follows 4 sisters coming of age in Civil War-era America. Over the span of several years, these imaginative and kind-hearted women must face the challenges and hypocrisy around them, navigate relationships, grow despite loss, and find comfort in one another. I have so much to say about this movie, but I'm going to hold it for just a second. I have some things to lay out there. I would like to preface this review by saying that, although I think that this story is for everyone to enjoy, it is specifically for women to enjoy, to relate to understand. Everything I will be saying in this review is just my interpretation and my experience with this story as a cisgender man. This means that my range for experiencing and relating to and even understanding this film is, of course, much more limited. And with that in mind, I strongly encourage all of you listening to this to interpret and to experience this story for yourself. I would also like to preface this review by admitting something very, very embarrassing. I have not read the book. And please don't turn off the episode. Please, 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 I beg of you. I'm sorry. And Louisa May Alcott, I know I'm letting you down. I know it. She is rolling in her grave right now. I have tried so many times to get into the book, and I just have not found my footing with it yet. I started it again the other day after watching this movie again, and I truly hope that this time will be the time that I finish it. I'm further than I've ever been before by about 10 pages. But with that in mind, I will be reviewing this film in isolation. So I'm not going to be comparing it to the book. And if it sounds like I'm comparing it to the book, just know that I do not know what I'm talking about. I've even done like a project at school about Little Women and the various adaptations of Little Women, but I've never read the book, which is funny. I just really love the story. And like I said in the beginning of this episode, I was in a Little Women musical in high school, and I played Mr. Lawrence, which is Laurie's grandpa. And I had a lot of fun with it, and I just connected so much with the story, and I got to know the story so well. So I really, I feel like I'm so connected to this story, even though I haven't read the source material. So yeah, I really need to read the source material. I have the book. It's been picked up and put down many a time, which is not to say anything about the book. It's a wonderful book, I'm sure. I just have a very low attention span sometimes. Okay, to get into the film a little bit, I want to start with some fun facts about this movie that are just kind of crazy to me. So this film was released in 2019, but Greta was actually working on this film since as early as 2014. This means that the production and the release of Lady Bird actually happened under the umbrella of this film's production. Lady Bird was really just a lapse in the life of Little Women's production, which I think is really interesting and cool because you kind of would have thought like Lady Bird came first in Gerwig's like life, but it was Little Women that, was first, and she was working on this long before Lady Bird. You never know. She probably had a script together for Lady Bird at this point, but who knows? But I just think it's really cool. But this also means that when she pitched Little Women to Sony, literally no one knew who she was because she didn't have Lady Bird yet. Of course, she was very well known and famous in the mumblecore circles, but that didn't always translate to Sony executives. And in the shoes of those Sony executives, they were kind of really running a risk in letting this somewhat unknown creative direct this film. Keep in mind that at this point, her only directing experience was on Nights and Weekends, which is very different from Little Women. It's just kind of crazy that this movie was made by Gerwig, or made at all even. When I watch this movie, I'm often just shocked that it exists. I love the fact that Gerwig was able to make a period piece. I love the fact that Gerwig was able to adapt this film so beautifully. And I loved the fact that all of these really famous actors came together to make this film. Speaking of that, I just wanted to take the time to briefly mention how star-studded this cast is. So Joe is played by Saoirse Ronan. Amy is played by Florence Pugh. Meg, Emma Watson. Beth, Eliza Scanlon. Aunt March is Meryl Streep. Marmee, Laura Dern. Laurie, Timothée Chalamet. And Father March is Bob Odenkirk, which a lot of people are shocked that Better Call Saul is in this movie. And, a lot of people have mentioned to me that they're always really distracted when Saul Goodman shows up. But I think he does a wonderful job in this role. I really like him as the father. I think it's very sweet, and he fits in very well. But yeah, it is weird. Like if Bryan Cranston showed up, I'd be like, huh? But this cast is just unbelievable. And for the most part, every performance is just spot on. And there's one that is not, and I will address that later. But yeah, it's just unbelievable that this movie was made and that it is what it is. So going into kind of the research side of things, how does this film fit into Gerwig's auteur signatures? In case this is the first episode of the GRETA-THON that you're listening to, my research on Gerwig is basically arguing for her as a film auteur. A film auteur is basically a filmmaker that has an identifiable signature across all of their films. So there's something that is distinctly, identifiably theirs in all of their films. Think of Guillermo del Toro or Alfred Hitchcock or M. Night Shyamalan. I'm taking him off the list of examples because he's been not impressing me lately. Should I review Trap? Maybe I should review Trap. That would be a lot of fun. Anyways, so how does this film fit into Gerwig's auteur signatures? So in the previous films that I've discussed so far in this series, I mentioned how Gerwig's auteur signature mainly centers around her depiction of female protagonists who are out of place from societal norms. So female protagonists who do not meet societal norms for age or gender, they act very against those societal norms. Considering this, Jo March is the perfect character to portray. Almost right away in the story, Jo makes her quote-unquote disappointment in being a girl explicitly clear. She explicitly states that she has no interest in fitting into the societal norms for being a woman. In one of the earlier scenes where Meg brings Jo to a dance and she meets Laurie, Meg tells Jo, "Don't stare, don't put your hands behind your back, don't say Christopher Columbus, don't shake hands, don't whistle," end quote. And it's upon meeting Laurie that she right away violates pretty much all of these rules for being a polite young woman. I know that this character is not a character that Gerwig created, but it's a perfect character for her to adopt into her auteur collection of protagonists. Jo is a woman who, despite pressures from society, embraces her place outside of the societal norms of being a woman. This quickly labels the character of Jo as a troublemaker or unworthy, especially by characters like Aunt March. But we all know that this really just makes her an iconic feminist trailblazer. And one thing I really like about how Jo's relationship with her femininity is depicted, though, is how she's shown struggling with rejecting these societal norms. It's shown that it's not easy to do this. And this is done most effectively in the scene where Jo explains to Marmee how she regrets turning Laurie down. And in this scene, she has a famous little line, and it goes like this, quote, "Women have minds and they have souls as well as just hearts. And they've got ambition and they've got talent as well as just beauty. And I'm so sick of people saying that love is just all a woman is fit for. But I'm so lonely." Ugh. That's a good scene, and it's such a good line. It's so beautifully written. So I think it's really important that Jo, it's not shown that she's just tackling everything. It's shown that, this is hard on her, and it's taxing to, constantly be putting yourself up against these societal norms. It's exhausting, really. It does not come easy. So I really like that they show this moment with Jo. It's so important, I think. And, in the story, Jo eventually does find love with a romantic partner, but that is hardly how Jo's story ends or how her story is defined in this movie. She goes on to achieve her dreams, which is really important. The film does not just end with Jo kissing Professor Bear under the umbrella in the rain. She goes on to achieve her dreams. She opens a school and she finally publishes her book that she's been working on. And I also really like that in the very end, the process of making the book is shown. It shows the very tactile making of the book. So like cutting out the cover, cutting the pages, printing the words on the pages, binding the book together and everything. It's not just like, well, here's your book and they hand it to her. It's, even the process of making the book is very like long and drawn out and very beautiful. And I really like that the camera doesn't turn away from this. It reminds me a lot of how Frances Ha ended. At the end of Frances Ha, we get to see Frances's dance that she was choreographing. And the camera doesn't turn away at all. We get to watch this whole dance happening. And the dance in itself really speaks to Frances's character. And I think in the same way, watching this book get made speaks to Jo's character and just how much she went through. Also, this is another thing I want to mention, but I really appreciate the character of Meg. I know that Meg was not created by Greta Gerwig. This was all Louisa May Alcott's invention, but I just really appreciate Meg's character, and I think the character of Meg is so important. And I really think the reason she's so important is summarized by this one line. Just because my dream is different than yours doesn't mean it's not important. This happens when Joe goes up to Meg before Meg's wedding, and Joe's basically begging Meg not to get married. I think that this is a really important representation to include. Just because Meg happens to fit, her wants, her desires happen to fit into the societal norms, doesn't mean they're wrong and doesn't mean she should turn away from them. And I really like that there are so many different representations of femininity in this story. And this is, like I said, all Louisa May Alcott. She did this. I love that it shows these different dreams and desires of women. And it's not just like, Joe's character is also very important, but it's not just Joe's character. We have kind of different shades of femininity here. It's so beautiful and it's so well done. You'll pretty much hear anyone that talks about this story just talk about how shocked they are about how relevant and modern this story is. And that it's so true how modern this story is. This story has remained timeless. I am just so glad that this story exists and that for over 100 years we've been able to relate to this. And there's a reason that this story keeps getting remade over and over and over again on, as a movie or as whatever. It's because we keep happening to need this story in our culture. And I think that Gerwig has done an excellent job in adapting the timelessness of the original source to the screen. I think that Gerwig's adaptation of Little Women is the definitive adaptation. She just paid so much respect to the novel. So it's just a stunning adaptation in my opinion. So yes, although this film is an adaptation, it lines up really well with Gerwig's habit of depicting female protagonists who are out of place. So it's almost like she just adopted this story to be in her auteur portfolio or auteur signatures. And obviously I don't think she intentionally, was like, oh, this will make me like an auteur if I do this. But it's most likely that she was just drawn to this story, maybe. The second signature is one that I mentioned in my Lady Bird and Nights and Weekends review, and that is the film highlighting weaker masculinities in order to highlight stronger femininities. I think that the film exemplifies this most between the characters of Amy and Laurie. And it's one scene in particular when Laurie approaches Amy to critique her for marrying Rich. It's a very, very popular scene in this movie. And I'm just going to read the little back and forth that they have. So Amy says, I've always known I would marry Rich. Why should I be ashamed of that? Laurie says, it's nothing to be ashamed of, as long as you love him. Amy says, well, I believe we have some power over who we love. It isn't just something that happens to a person. Laurie says, I think the poets might disagree. Amy says, well, I'm not a poet. I'm just a woman. And as a woman, there's no way for me to make my own money. Not enough to earn a living or to support my family. And if I had enough money, which I don't, that money would belong to my husband the moment we got married. If we had children, they would be his, not mine. They would be his property. So don't sit there and tell me that marriage isn't an economic proposition, because it is. It may not be for you, but it most certainly is for me. That is one of my favorite moments of the film. It is so well done, and I love the back and forth between Amy and Laurie here. That is going on for most of the film. So this film is critiquing Laurie's masculinity. Laurie in this scene is just showing how naive he is about how society works and how women are mistreated. I feel like this monologue that Amy has was addressed to the men consuming this story. So sorry, Louisa. I know I'm a culprit. I know. Yeah, so it's sort of showing how Laurie is just not as understanding and doesn't have to think about these things and has and benefits from the privileges of being a man and doesn't have to think about the strategy that comes with marriage. And he doesn't have to think about his career and money and things like that. It all just kind of is handed to him. Whereas a woman really has to think about these things in order to, make it. I think that my favorite just relationship of this film is Amy and Laurie. And my favorite character of the film probably is Amy. I like pretty much any scene with her in it. I think her character is so compelling and has such drastic change as time passes on. And I just love the romance between her and Laurie. I love the cinematography in those scenes. There's a lot of like extremely wide shots, like when Fred Vaughn proposes to Amy and she declines him. It's like a very wide shot with this dramatic music playing and swelling in the background. And then when Amy and Laurie finally get together and they kiss, it's also like this wide shot. And it's just so beautiful. Every scene with them is just crafted perfectly, and I love it. Now, in this film, a new signature also begins to emerge, and that is the mother-daughter relationship, and more specifically, the sameness that a mother and daughter share, like the similarities that they share. The similarities between Marmee and Joe specifically are very reminiscent of the similarities in Lady Bird between Lady Bird and Marion. And if you've seen Barbie, you know where this is going. This is something that Gerwig has been doing in all of her recent films, is highlighting the relationship between a mother and a daughter. She's mentioned multiple times that this is something that's fascinated her. To talk about the similarities of the mother and daughter in this movie, there's a moment when Marmee reveals how angry she is about the world nearly every day to Joe. Joe is a very angry character, and she just hasn't learned how to manage that anger or, suppress that anger. There's also a scene very early on in the film where Marmee is wiping away a tear from her face as she walks into a room. And when she walks into the room, she smiles as if like nothing was troubling her. And later in the film, there's a scene when Joe wipes away her tear in the same way and then walks into a room and smiles for everyone. These two scenes kind of bookend the movie a bit. And I love that parallel between the mother and the daughter. There's also the moment when Marmee selflessly gives her scarf to a soldier, and that moment is juxtaposed with Joe giving her hair up for Marmee to pay for the train ticket. So there's a lot of moments where it's just kind of like comparing the two. It's very similar to Lady Bird. In Lady Bird, there's this scene with Lady Bird driving her car in Sacramento, juxtaposed with the scenes of Marion driving her car in Sacramento. To kind of highlight their sameness. So this movie is doing the same thing, and we'll see in Barbie that Barbie does the same thing. Now moving on to the technical stuff, kind of moving away from all this auteur business. That's kind of like the analysis of the film, the discussion really. Yes, moving into my critiques of the film. And I say critiques like I have anything bad to say about this movie, but I do not. So this movie tells two stories at once. The original Little Women novel was divided into two parts. It was two separate releases. One part centered around the girls' childhood, and then the next part was several years later when the girls were all young adults. So instead of showing this movie kind of like having the timelines separated from one another, something that Gerwig does is just juxtaposes those two timelines next to each other. So these stories are just kind of like laid on top of one another. So we are introduced to the girls when they're young adults, but then the film cuts to their childhood. And I think there's maybe one moment where it says this is like 7 or 8 years earlier. But that's really the only indication that we get that there's a difference in the timelines, that we're watching, a flashback or something. Other than that, we really have no indicators whether or not we're watching, the past or present. But one thing Gerwig does to emphasize the differences in time is her use of color. So when she is showing scenes from the girls' childhood, the colors are very warm. The saturation and the warmth of the shot is really extremely turned up. It almost looks as if you're looking into a fireplace. It's just the shots are very red, very orange. If you've seen the film, you've probably noticed. And this is juxtaposed with the scenes from present day, or I guess the girls in, their young adulthood. Those scenes are very cool. and the warmth is taken out of them. It's almost like something is lost or missing since the warmth is taken out. And it kind of shows the loss of, in my opinion, it shows the loss of like childhood joy and nostalgia and, the loss of innocence that comes with growing up. The color sort of fades from your life a little bit. As you sort of accept the reality of the world, you start seeing less color almost. Not literally, of course, but, and looking back on your childhood, you always think of better days, you think of happiness and joy, and you think of warmth and comfort. So I really like that Gerwig took that very literally, and the childhood scenes are very warm and they're very comforting, like a fireplace almost. And then when they're cut very closely with these scenes from adulthood, it feels like there's something missing in adulthood, and there is something missing, or someone. That is such a terrible way to talk about. That is a terrible way to bring up Beth not being there, but it's true. Like the taking away the color in a way does really communicate that there has been a loss for these characters. So I think that, this is something that Gerwig adapted the story to have. This is something that she added. I think that this really emphasizes various moments of the film. It really emphasizes the coming of age of these girls. It's really done just excellently. It's one of my favorite things about this movie. It's what I return to this movie the most for. I don't know. I think this is just brilliant. And one of the most beautiful moments of this movie is at the very end when Jo March is very kind of invested in her writing, and she's closing people out and everything because she really has that book and she has, that inspiration. And Professor Bear visits the family to kind of be like, hey, Jo, I love you. But Jo isn't really picking up on it. And eventually Jo's family is like, Jo, he came back for you. He wants to be with you. And they all they go out in the rain and they're chasing after him, Jo and her sisters. And at that moment, even though they're young adults, the color returns. And, when they're in the carriage, they're all laughing and just so excited about oh my gosh, Jo's going to be with someone. She, found someone. And they're just all so happy, and the warmth is there. And it's like you're looking into that fireplace again. And it's like the happiness and the joy of their childhood return to them, even though they've been through so much and they've lost so much. So really, this is also a very hopeful story. And I think it's a story that is about loss a lot, because I think a lot of these characters would have thought that they would have never found happiness again after, Beth passed away. But it did come back. And it's very bittersweet, but it did come back, and these characters were happy again, and they found a way to reconnect with the joys of their childhood. And Jo went on to write her story in honor of Beth. She would not have found the inspiration or had the courage to write her story if it wasn't for Beth. And it took losing Beth for Jo to really devote herself to her writing. So I really do think that this is a story about loss, and it's a story about legacy as well. Writing to honor someone's legacy, to keep Beth alive. Jo kept writing. This is all basic stuff about the story, and I'm just stupid and babbling about it, but I just think it's so cool. And it's just stunning. It's a beautiful story. I just love it. This also leads me into just how the film is arranged. I talked about this a little bit already, but instead of deciding to portray this story exactly how the novel did, Gerwig did take liberties. She took risks in portraying this movie differently, or portraying the story differently. She showed these timelines happening simultaneously of each other. And this is something that, this could lose a lot of audience members. This could confuse a lot of people. This could have lost people. So it would have been so much easier for her to show all of the childhood scenes and then show all of the adulthood scenes. But she wanted to show these things happening in tandem with one another. And I think that made this film so much more effective because we got to see the parallels between the past and the present. There's kind of like the very surface level parallels. Like there is the moment when Laurie sees Joe in her attic, pacing back and forth, writing something. And that's cut with a scene where Joe is in her New York apartment, pacing back and forth, writing. So it's just a clever way to cut between the past and the present by showing like, oh, these characters are still doing the same things they were doing back then. Another moment to mention is when Amy and Laurie are in the garden together in France, and that scene is cut with Amy's childhood, and it's showing Amy like making a plaster mold of her foot, and she says, "Oh, I'm making this to remind Laurie of how cute my feet are all the time." So, for some people, they could be like, oh, I never thought Amy liked Laurie. But I think by arranging the film this way, it shows that, oh, yeah, Amy was always in love with Laurie. But I think one of the most effective uses of juxtaposing the past and the present together, and I know the key word today is juxtaposition. I've been using it so much. But one of the best uses of this skill that Gerwig implements is in Beth's death scene. So Beth, I think she has scarlet fever, and she gets it at one point during her childhood, and she eventually recovers from it. And she gets it again kind of like in, everyone's young adulthood, and that's when she doesn't recover from it, and that's when she passes away. And so I think that the way Gerwig depicted this made it so much more effective. So in this scene, it starts with a close-up of Saoirse Ronan's eye, so Joe's eye, and she's waking up from sleeping, and she sees that Beth's bed is empty, and it's very warm colors. We see a lot of warm colors. So she sees Beth's bed is empty, and she panics, and she runs downstairs thinking that maybe Beth is gone, and maybe she, couldn't be there to save Beth. She goes downstairs, and she sees Marmee at the dinner table, and Marmee's sitting there with her back turned to Joe. And she's blocking, we can't see what's on the other side of Marmee. And Marmee turns around, and behind Marmee is Beth sitting there. And she's alive, and she's healthy. She made it. And Marmee just has this huge grin on her face. And Joe, gives a sigh of relief. This scene is back to back with the same exact scene almost. It starts the same way. Joe, it's a close-up of Joe's eye. She's waking up, and she sees that Beth's bed is empty, and she panics, and she runs downstairs. But this time, the only difference is the colors are very cold, and it just feels a little lifeless. So Joe runs downstairs, and we again see Marmee with her back turned to Joe, and she's sitting at the dinner table. And this time, when Marmee turns around, she reveals no one sitting behind her. And it also reveals Marmee's face, and her face is just, she's sobbing, and it's so sorrowful, and it's just so heartbreaking. And you just know, from seeing this, that Beth is gone. By showing these two things directly next to each other, I think it emphasizes the parallel, and it emphasizes kind of the differences between childhood and adulthood, and what kind of is lost in the coming of age process. I think that really what the arrangement of this film does is it emphasizes the emotion of the movie. So I think that this was a really clever choice on Gerwig's part. I think this was definitely a risk, but I think it was just the correct decision, and I think it's brilliant. Another decision that Gerwig made that I am very happy she did, she used the same actors from the past than she did with the present. So, she very easily could have used child actors to show all the girls, but she used the same actors. So we had almost 30-year-olds playing girls who are 13, 14, 15. And at times this was a little uncanny, but I think that this was so worth it, and I think that this was the right choice. I think it just really makes these characters seem more cohesive, and you don't really have to readjust your mind halfway through the movie and be like, oh, this girl is now Emma Watson, or that girl is now Florence Pugh. You just kind of know the whole time. So I really like that this decision was made as well. I think that really the easy route in Hollywood is to just cast a bunch of child actors to use here. And I'm glad that Gerwig did not do that. This is like the very unpopular route to go down. In fact, I don't know a case when, the same actors are used in such different time skips. But yeah, I'm glad she did that. I think she's brilliant. She's a smarty, that lady. There's just so many other moments that I like about this movie. Like I mentioned, anything with Laurie and Amy, I just love. I love their storyline. Another thing I love is Aunt March, played by Meryl Streep. I think that she is just hilarious, and she has some really good quotes as well. I really enjoy Aunt March's character. I think that Timothée Chalamet is wonderful in this. I know I've critiqued his acting skills in the past, but he fit right into this movie. This movie doesn't feel as long as it is. This is like almost a 2.5 hour movie, but it really knows how to make it go by fast and everything. Gerwig had such, I don't know, a daunting task in front of her. I think the original novel is about 400 pages. Like, this is a long, very detailed story. So really, any time you're going to be adapting this story to a screen, it is almost like an impossible task. But I think that Gerwig, like, through her use of color and arranging the different timelines to fit with one another, I think that she did just a perfect job in adapting this story. And like I said, I think this is the definitive version of this story in the film format. The score is really good here. I don't give the score enough credit when I watch this movie. There are so many quotes I love. Here is my favorite quote from the movie. "We could never have so loved the earth had we had no childhood in it." Beautiful. I just knew that off the top of my head too. "We could never have so loved the earth had we had no childhood in it." Yeah, there's just so much I like about this movie. How long have I been yapping? Oh, we are past an hour, so I'm going to wrap it up a bit. Some things I don't like about this movie. There is, in fact, only one thing I do not like about this, and that is Emma Watson's performance as Meg. Emma Watson, I'm so sorry, but it just was not doing it for me all the time. I don't know why this is. I think she has the very hard task of adapting the British accent to kind of have like that early American accent that's like sort of British, but not really. But also that's her job as an actor to do that. And also Florence Pugh, oh my gosh, and Saoirse Ronan is Irish. And I feel like, yeah, so they did it and they did it fine. So I don't know why I'm making excuses for her. A lot of her line deliveries just were not that good. And I know it's also hard to kind of strike a balance between paying homage to, this book that is over 100 years old, but also making it modern and making it easily accessible for modern audiences. It's a hard line to walk as an actor, I'm sure. But there were a bunch of actors in this movie that were making it seem like a piece of cake. So the line deliveries were just not it for me. I love the character of Meg. I love her part in this story, like I said. And I think that Emma Watson does have some really good moments in this movie and in her performance, but just definitely like a little bit of the weak link here. Okay, with all of this said, I am going to give Little Women, the 2019 adaptation, the Nick pick. On its own, Louisa May Alcott's original novel is a masterpiece. With that in mind, adapting this story to the screen should be a daunting and nearly impossible task. I believe that Gerwig, however, translated the timelessness of this story to the screen beautifully and perfectly. Gerwig's use of color to communicate childhood, passing time, emotion, coming of age, and memory is outstanding and so moving and effective. Her arrangement of this original story's two timelines to juxtapose one another is brilliant and beyond effective. And of course, Gerwig's conveying of the coming-of-age genre is just flawless. We know that. She is the golden standard for the coming-of-age genre at this point. I do not just recommend this film. I am asking you, I'm requesting you to watch it. This is a must watch. And this is, in fact, one of the very few times on this show where I am telling you to watch something. So there's that. Okay. In this segment, I'll be reading some letters from fellow coffee and movie enjoyers about their own coffee and movie opinions, reviews, thoughts, hot takes, or whatever. I will not be doing Dear Coffee Nick this week, but the next Dear Coffee Nick will be in the Barbie episode, which will be coming out at some point within the next week or two. It depends. Let me live my life, okay? But I highly encourage to send in any Gerwig-related questions. I'd be happy to answer them. But of course, I have been talking about Gerwig so much recently that I kind of want to talk about other things too. So especially if you have, just questions or comments about movies or coffee, any of them, send those in too. I would really enjoy talking about those. If you would like to send in a letter, please feel free to write Dear Coffee Nick through DM on social media or email coffeenicksmoviepics@gmail.com. All right, everyone, thank you so much for bearing with me, and thank you for having the patience and the understanding of like me pushing these episodes back a little bit. It's really meant a lot. I'm the type of person that I like to live life and feel ready to create something. I don't like to force myself to create something if I am not really in the right headspace. So it's really meant a lot that I've been able to just take more time to have the energy to make these episodes and everything. Because I'm uncomfortable putting out a product if it's not my best or if I'm not in the right headspace. And sometimes I do that, but I really strive to deliver my best product and everything. And of course, like if I had a sponsor on the podcast, I would of course be releasing these on time. All right, everyone, thank you all for tuning into this episode of the GRETA-THON on Coffee Nick's Movie Picks. Please be sure to rate the show on Apple Podcasts, follow the show's social media, and share the show with your friends. Until next time, it's no use, Joe. It's no use. I will see you then. Thanks again for listening to the GRETA-THON on Coffee Nick's Movie Picks. Our opening theme is The Light Within, and our closing theme is When the Ash Settles, both themes by the Westerlies. Before you go, please be sure to follow the show on social media at Coffee Nick's Movie Picks, and give the show the Nick Pick by rating it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Thanks so much.